Harold's recent habit of reading the obituaries at breakfast was his only new hobby in years. He didn't know why he read them. It was something he couldn't really explain. He reached for another jumbo carrot muffin, his hand fumbling around in the crinkly plastic packaging, his eyes glued to the page. "Should you be eating that?" Audrey said from over by the kitchen counter, in her quilted housecoat and bare feet. Lately, Harold had been letting himself go, allowing the pillowy fat to accumulate around his middle in spite of the fact that he was terrified of having a heart attack. He ignored her. Russell Darrell Lynch. Suddenly, in a diving accident, on September 22nd, age 61, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. A great adventurer, Russell climbed mountains for charity, raising money through his foundation. Harold, chewing his muffin, reflected that his life, should he die tomorrow, would certainly not warrant much of an obituary. Audrey grabbed the muffins off the kitchen table and put them back on the counter, out of reach. Harold seemed to be having a midlife crisis, but it wasn't about wanting to possess young, gorgeous women, or lusting after a car he couldn't even afford to insure. He wasn't sure what it was about. Crisis implied a certain energy, and there wasn't much energy about Harold these days. What he was having felt more like a midlife slump, a depression. He told himself every day that he had much to be grateful for. He had his health. He had his sons, whom he loved unconditionally. And he loved his wife, Audrey. Not with the same youthful enthusiasm they'd started out with. That was hard even to imagine now, let alone remember. But with something abiding. However, he was at that age when there is more behind than lies ahead, and what lies ahead isn't all that appealing. "My God!" he spluttered, startled out of his inertia, squinting at the newspaper and lifting it closer. "What?" Audrey said. She was holding the coffee pot in one hand and a cloth for wiping the kitchen counter in the other. The boys hadn't come down to breakfast yet. They were going to be late for school. Harold was slow to answer, not quite believing what he'd read. Tom Grossman is dead. Audrey came to peer over his shoulder. "Heart attack," Harold said. He felt a sudden weirdness flooding over him, an alarming palpitation of the heart, a difficulty breathing, a pooling of the blood in his feet. After a long pause, Audrey said, "I wish you wouldn't read the obituaries." Mercifully, the strange feeling was already passing. "It's a good thing I do," Harold responded, a little petulant. If he hadn't read it in the paper, he might never have found out about Tom Grossman's death, or at least not until long after the funeral was over. So different were the circles in which they now traveled. Tom had been his university roommate and best friend, but Tom had gone on to medical school, and Harold had gone to work for the government. Tom's life had seemed to be always expanding, while Harold's had seemed to be always contracting. Somehow, they hadn't stayed in touch. He hadn't seen Tom in close to 15 years. But it was Tom, all right. There was a photo. Suddenly, of a heart attack at the age of 49. Christ. Tom's life had just suffered a pretty definitive contraction. In lieu of flowers, please send donations to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. "I suppose we should go to the funeral," Audrey said, sounding doubtful. "Of course we'll go," Harold said, thinking about how much time he had left, and about what kind of figure he'd cut among Tom's mourners at Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Would his black suit still fit? "I guess," Audrey said slowly, "I'd better figure out what we're going to wear." Audrey, in the bedroom getting ready for the funeral, had just put runs in her only 2 pairs of black pantyhose and was down to a single pair of charcoal gray. Shit. This time, she took a deep breath and deliberately slowed down, rolling them up her legs like you were supposed to. It wouldn't help any for Harold and the boys to see her agitation, and she didn't want to have to stop at a convenience store on the way and try to put on another pair in a moving car. There. The pantyhose were on and intact. Audrey put her housecoat on over a dark blouse and pantyhose, hauled the ironing board out of the closet, and plugged in the iron, worrying about Harold.